Now then, Final Monkey again. Welcome back, anyone who's seen the channel before. You might know I'm sort of going through the years now, talking about some of my favourite records in this collection from the years onwards. I started in 1966 a couple of episodes ago. We're now at 1968, and just to reiterate, I'm only going to talk about those I've got on vinyl. I've got about 1,000 or just over 1,000 vinyl albums behind me, ever-growing collection, but I've got more than 2,000 CDs upstairs, so you know, these lists they're my favourite vinyl LPs, but they may not contain some of even what I think are some of the greatest records from that year, because I'm going to stick to the vinyl given the name of this channel. So 1968, yeah, Summer of Love behind us now, a world of unrest and sort of, yeah, civil unrest, riots in Paris, particularly in America. Here, the beginning of the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland. Martin Luther King assassinated in America. So a very sort of different vibe, which may or may not be reflected to some extent in this little collection. It certainly is with the first one I'm going to mention. And I'm going to cheat slightly. I'm going to put two at joint 10 because I couldn't decide which of these two to leave out. So firstly, it's the American New York band The Fugs, who were basically three poets who brought in top quality musicians and producers and everything and put their poetry to music, and not just any old music. I mean, on this album, this is It Crawled Into My Hand, honest. And on this album, the poetry set to radically different styles: waltzes, rock, folk, sort of jazz, gospel, even medieval sort of chanting type music on here. But it's good stuff. I do love poetry set to some sort of rhythm and music. I find it just helps me digest the poetry, and there's all sorts of good stuff on here. Piss Off Johnny, they're sort of having a pop at sort of redneck cultures in America, and Wide Wide River, which I think was inspired by Ronald Reagan's initial entry into politics, and their sort of the beginnings of the sort of feeling despondent about the very idea of democracy, and yeah, just, I mean, some words from that one, some of the poetry from that one, Wide Wide River, yeah. I've been swimming in this river of shit more than 20 years, I'm getting tired of it. Don't like swimming, I hope it'll soon run dry, but I got to go on swimming, 'cause I don't want to die. Yeah, so it's all really good stuff, you know, reflecting the Vietnam War that was raging at the time, and etc. So I wanted to keep that in, but it is a bit different. It's a bit, because of that wide range of styles, it's a little bit like a novelty album, but I do like it, The Fugs. Then at joint number 10, going across to the other coast of America, this is a band from San Diego. This is Iron Butterfly. The title of the album, Inagada da Vida, which I think is some sort of phonetic type pronunciation and spelling of In the Garden of Eden, which I think is the subject matter for the love song that is the 17-minute epic, takes up a whole aside too, the Adam and Eve sort of story, which I love. I love that side, and that's why I've included it in this top 10. I mean, these were considered, along with Vanilla Fudge, the sort of heaviest of the psychedelic rock bands from America, and very influential on the development of heavy rock that was to come. So yeah, a good sort of bluesy psychedelic rock album, Iron Butterfly, my joint number 10. My number 9, this is Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends. This is my favourite Simon and Garfunkel LP, although I've got to say, I think I do prefer Paul Simon's solo material to his Simon and Garfunkel stuff. And one of the reasons for that is I just think their albums are a bit up and down for me. There's some absolutely beautiful stuff on here, not least America and Old Friends, which are just absolutely classics, gorgeous things. And then there are other beautiful moments within some of the other songs, but I do think it's a bit up and down. It includes Mrs. Robinson, which feels a bit out of place on it, but so, you know, I might have had it higher if it had been more consistent in my view. But anyway, it's a great album. My number 9, Bookends, Simon and Garfunkel. My number 8, this is a 9-piece band. You can see hopefully 9 members of the band on there. The album cover actually claims that this is a wedding of rock and jazz, but actually it's much more than that. It's sort of the songs on here veer from. It's not so much a fusion. It's different genres just played by the same band of extremely competent musicians and vocalists in different styles. So it goes from classical to jazz to funk to croonie pop to soul to some sort of German oompa sounding stuff to gospel, and then back again to classical. And you know, for that reason, I probably theoretically I shouldn't like it. You probably heard me ramble on about coherence, cohesiveness in albums, and a coherent feel where you can get lost in the album and one track sort of connects to, leads to another. This isn't like that. This is a collection of very sort of different styles, but it's got a great sound. It's really well played. There are some great songs, not least the hits Spinning Wheel, You Make Me So Very Happy. So it's good stuff of its time. Blood, Sweat and Tears, my number 8. My number 7, this is a good one. This is the Byrds. I think it's their 5th album. For me, it's far and away their best album. This is the notorious Byrds brothers, and this is consistent and coherent. And I mean, it's sort of Americana type sound, and I listen to a lot of Americana and go to Americana festivals and things. I love that sort of branch of rock popular music these days, and this sounds so fresh. It could be, you know, from anywhere within the last 10 years. Some of the songs on here really nicely played, and that's all despite the fact the Byrds were going through a really sort of traumatic time. You'll see on the front cover, hopefully, there's only 3 of them there. I think the David Crosby left or was kicked out partway through this album. He might have been meant for that 4th stable door there, I don't know. The drummer left and rejoined. They temporarily brought back the previous singer, who then left again. They had to bring in session musicians because of all this coming and going. And despite that, as I say, I think it really is their strongest album. A real good one. The notorious Byrds brothers, my number 7. My number 6, now this is about to cause consternation on the internet, I think, with people who were outraged that I've dared to place this one so low in my rankings for 1968. But this is the Beatles, the White Album, with its brilliant minimalist cover contrasting the over-the-top sort of cover of their previous album. Sorry, I've got it upside down. So the only clue to who it is on here is a little embossed the Beatles there, which you won't be able to see. Inside, just photographs of the 4 eminent Scousers. There are photographs of them as well. I'll pick one out at random. Oh, there's Paul, maybe my least favourite Beatle, but there we are. That's what you do for plucking one out at random. So lovely cover. It's a double album. There are some great songs on here. I mean, I just absolutely love. I mean, this is my favourite Beatles album, just to say as well. This, and then probably Rubber Soul, then Revolver, then Abbey Road maybe, but this is my favourite. I think it's probably my favourite because I used to work with this guy at the Steelworks in Hartlepool donkeys years ago, and he used to have wherever we went on jobs, he had a little cassette player strapped to his overalls, and he used to play this album non-stop. For months on end, I heard nothing but the White Album, and some of those tracks really got stuck in my head in a good way. Bungalow Bill, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness Is a Warm Gun, absolutely gorgeous song. Blackbird, of course. Julia, John Lennon's song to his deceased mother. Yeah Blues, Helter Skelter. Sexy Sadie is having a pop at the Maharishna or Yogi or Guru or whatever he is, who they'd been in India with just immediately preceding this. So it is a really, really good album, but I've got to say I don't play it that often, maybe because it's already stuck in my head or what, but I don't tend to play the Beatles that much. But there we are, I've got it at my number 6. Please argue with me in the comments below, as they say. My number 5, what a cracking album this is. I've really enjoyed listening to this twice over the last couple of days. This is Jeff Beck's Truth. This is just heavy, hard blues rock at its absolute best. Fantastic band. Beck is on top form. I mean, I'm not a musician, and it's not for me to analyse guitarists and who's better and but Beck always seems different, to do something different to other guitarists, and he really I think this is one of his great early albums. He's got Ronnie Wood actually on bass, but it's the singing on this album as well as the playing. The singing, I mean, Rod Stewart really just sings the fuck out of these songs, really. I can't put it any differently than that. It's some of the best blues rock singing I've ever heard, and therefore I've got this cracking album at my number 5, Jeff Beck, Truth. My number 4 is a debut album from Joni Mitchell. This is Songs to a Seagull. And, you know, although it's a debut, Joni Mitchell was 25, I think, when she brought this out. And it doesn't feel like she was finding her way or exploring sort of new territory. It feels fully formed. It's typical Joni Mitchell in that it's sophisticated and cool lyrically and musically. It's maybe not quite as jazzy as some of the albums that followed on from this, that maybe got a lot more recognition than this, but I think it is a fantastic debut. It's a great singing. I mean, if you just listen to the first song, the brilliant autobiographical opener, I Came to the City, superb, and that sets the tone for a really, really strong album. So I've got it as my number 4, Joni Mitchell's Song to a Seagull. Right, the top 3. Got them in the... Hang on a second, that's right, I thought I had them in the wrong order. Yeah, this is number 3, and this is Music from Big Pink by the band. The band, this was their debut album. Up until this point they had been Bob Dylan's backing band from the mid-60s onwards, and Big Pink refers to the house that was painted pink on the gable end, out in the sort of countryside, upstate New York way, I think, that a couple of the members had hired, and they spent a long time there with Dylan, recorded the famous basement tapes there. And they were persuaded to go their own way. They were starting to write songs. They had some obviously gifted musicians, but several good singers in the band and songwriters. And so they had to. I mean, these were 4 Canadians and sort of Arkansas farm lad, I think, and Levon Helm. And they had to persuade Helm to come back from working away on the oil rigs to make this album, but they'll be glad they did, because this really did change the sort of scene, you know, psychedelic rock and heavy blues rock and all those sort of 66, and this set a much more what's the historical Americana. A lot of these songs sound like they're old songs or traditional songs, but they're not. They're new songs written by the members of the band, although they do a Dylan cover, and Dylan helped, I think, with writing jointly one or two of the songs on here. But this is an absolutely fantastic album. As I say, it set the scene for a great body of work to follow over the next 4 or 5 years, and it was really influential, particularly on some of the sort of aristocracy, I suppose I could call them, of the British rock scene. So apparently this album single-handedly persuaded Clapton to fold Cream up and to seek a new musical direction. George Harrison was so taken with it and the sound that he, at the first opportunity, I think within a couple of months of hearing this, he was off over to New York and out into the country to meet these and to find out how they'd created this sound, how they did it. And Roger Waters claims it as the most influential album on him and Pink Floyd of all, although that's maybe more difficult to detect in the way that band developed. But anyway, they all claim it as an absolute major influence. I love it anyway for on its own merits. I love the artwork on the front, although a lot of people diss this as far too naive. This is of course Bob Dylan painting, but that's music from Big Pink. My number 3. My number 2 is the one and only Jimi Hendrix. This is his third studio album, his third and last studio album, Electric Ladyland, with the infamous picture of nudes on the front and the brilliant photograph of Hendrix himself in the inside cover. And this is, as I say, he died within 2 years of this album being released. He did release some live stuff and prepared a lot of other material in the studios, but this was the actual last release. And I think it would have been his strongest studio album if it had been a single album. Actually, this is a double album. It does contain some, slightly less than essential Hendrix tracks, but it contains some absolute beauties as well. The title track is gorgeous, soulful. Crosstown Traffic, a brilliant radio pop song. Sean Hendrix could write pop as well as everything else and play pop. Voodoo Child, the long version, 15 minutes on side 1, and with Stevie Winwood prominent on organ as well. And I just think that's a fantastic slow burning sort of blues number. Gypsy Eyes, Burning the Midnight Lamp on side 2. Moon Turn the Tides on side 3, and then the end of the album is absolutely stunning. It's brilliant. The last 2 tracks, All Along the Watchtower, the absolutely definitive version of that Bob Dylan song, which Dylan himself claims is the definitive version as well. And then Voodoo Child, Slight Return, the one that became the single, the more familiar, shorter version of Voodoo Child, which is just absolutely stunning bit of hard blues rock. One of the great rock songs of all time. So unbelievable album. Who knows where Hendrix would have gone after this? Shame we never found out. But that's Electric Ladyland, my number 2. And then my number 1. This is if anybody hasn't got this album that I'm going to hold up or hasn't heard it, then we don't even bother seeking it out to listen to it on YouTube or anything like that. Just get it ordered, go out and buy it in whatever format you can, because this is one of the great all-time albums. And this is my number 1, Van Morrison's Astral Weeks. This can be considered, or Van might consider this his solo debut album, although I did talk the other week about its predecessor, Blowing Your Mind, which Van didn't have full creative control over, but he certainly did on this one. This was produced in 2 days in a studio in New York. Van had gone over there with all these songs in his head. There were signs earlier of him sort of working some of these themes up. They're essentially mystical, poetical, lyrical sort of explorations of his Belfast childhood, and beautiful, absolutely beautiful lyrics, and the music is just something else. Basically, the musicians on here are Van Morrison himself on guitar and vocals, Richard Davis on bass, Connie Kay on drums, and Jay Berliner on additional guitar. And those other three are some of the top jazz session musicians from the USA. So it's got a real sort of jazzy feel to it, but it's got a real quality and a difference. There is nothing else that sounds like this in the how many years since this came out. 50 odd. Is it 50 odd? Yeah, it must be 50 odd years. Yeah, 54 years since this came out. I don't think there's anything that sounded like this. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. Rather than me warble on about it, I reread the great Lester Bangs, who wrote a chapter in this book, Psychotic Reactions and Carburetor Done. Great book, by the way. But he wrote a whole chapter on Astral Weeks and what it meant to him, particularly at a time of his own personal problems and issues, and how important this album was for him. And this has stuck with me. And I hardly a month goes by without me playing this album over those last, for me, what, about 50 years, 48 years, something like that. So I just wanted to quote from Lester Bangs, where he says, "It sounded like the man who made Astral Weeks was in terrible pain, but with a redemptive element in his blackness, with ultimate compassion for the suffering of others, and a swathe of pure beauty and mystical awe that cuts right through to the heart." So, yeah, I can't say better than Lester Bangs, so I want to leave it on that. One of my favourite albums of all time, my number one from 1968, Van Morrison's Astral Weeks. Thanks for listening. Hope you might join me next time for 1969. Cheers.